They call me a monster. They call me a demon. But I forget that history is written by cowards. I saw my blood betrayed and my family destroyed. I learned a simple truth. Power is not begged for. It is imposed with fear. I am Vlad III Drăculea, and this is the story of how death itself learned to fear me. This is the Immortals, where legends never die. Subscribe and take your place in the ranks of legends. I was born in 1431, not in a palace of marble and gold, but inside a Saxon stone fortress, Sigeshora, in the mountains of Transylvania, a frontier town, a buffer zone between powers. This was not a place of safety. It was a place designed to endure siege, betrayal, and war. My father was Vlad II Drăculea, a ruler shaped by brutality and politics. He was not merely a local prince. He was an elite knight, inducted into the Order of the Dragon, a military brotherhood founded by the King of Hungary and sanctioned by the papacy. Its mission was clear: defend Christian Europe from the expanding Ottoman Empire. Membership was rare, dangerous, and permanent. Once sworn, there was no retreat. The dragon was not symbolism, it was a threat. My surname was Drăculea. In Latin, it meant son of the dragon. But among peasants and enemies, the meaning shifted. They heard something darker, something closer to devil. Names mattered in my world. A name could inspire loyalty or justify murder. From infancy, I was surrounded by tension. Wallachia was a land where rulers were not removed by law, but by knives, poison, or blinding irons. The boyars, our own nobles, changed allegiance without warning. A prince who ruled with mercy rarely ruled for long. What kind of child grows up knowing that power is never inherited, only enforced? I watched envoys arrive with smiles and leave with threats. I heard prayers spoken in public and conspiracies whispered at night. Coins bearing my father's dragon circulated through the land, reminding everyone that we stood on the front line of Christendom. If we fell, the Ottomans would march west without resistance. My childhood had no illusions, no innocence. It was filled with steel, broken oaths, and the certainty that survival required strength without hesitation. This land did not create just rulers. It created hard ones. I was born into fear, and fear became my first teacher. In 1442, my life as a Wallachian prince ended. I was 11 years old enough to understand fear, young enough to remember it forever. My father, Vlad II Drăculea, was trapped between two giants, the Kingdom of Hungary to the west and the Ottoman Empire to the south. Wallachia existed only by negotiation and submission. To keep his throne, my father made the only decision left to him. He surrendered his sons. My brother Radu and I were sent to the court of Sultan Mehmed II in Adrianople, the Ottoman capital. We were not guests. We were hostages, living guarantees of obedience. If my father rebelled, we would be executed without hesitation. I crossed the border as a prince. I arrived as a prisoner. At the Ottoman court, I was forced to adapt quickly. I learned the Turkish language, court etiquette, military discipline, and the hierarchy of an empire built on absolute authority. The Ottomans ruled through order, not chaos. Fear was not emotional, it was systematic. Executions were public and frequent. I saw men beheaded for disobedience, officials punished for failure, and enemies eliminated without trial. Impalement was not rare. It was a tool, a warning, a method designed to be remembered. Punishment was never hidden. Terror was instructional. I was taught history, mathematics, science, and Islamic theology. They educated the mind while breaking the will. Obedience was rewarded. Resistance ended quickly. Mercy was never offered. It was considered weakness. My brother Radu adapted. He learned submission, earned favor, and blended into the court. I did not. I remained silent. I watched patterns. I learned how fear controlled men more effectively than loyalty ever could. What kind of ruler is shaped by captivity, humiliation, and constant threat? The Ottoman Empire stole my childhood, but it gave me something far more dangerous: a complete understanding of how power is enforced, how obedience is created, and how fear becomes law. I survived, and I remembered everything. In 1447, the news that reached my Ottoman confinement destroyed any trace of childhood I still carried. Betrayal, the disease that had been eating Wallachia from within, finally consumed my family. My father, Vlad II Drăculea, wasn't overthrown by the Sultan, but by his own boyars, the Wallachian nobility, acting in alliance with the Hungarian regent, John Hunyadi, a man who would become my nemesis. My father tried to maneuver, to negotiate, to survive. He failed. They hunted him down near Balteni, captured him, and murdered him in cold blood. They simply cut off his head, a quick and filthy end for a prince who had considered himself a warrior of Christendom. The fate of my older brother, Mircea II, was far worse. Mircea was a skilled warrior, a man capable of leading Wallachia. The boyars loyal to Hunyadi captured him. They did not grant him a swift death. First, to ensure he could never lead a revolt, they blinded him with red-hot irons. Then, in an act of calculated savagery meant to erase any symbol of resistance, they buried him alive on the bank of a river as the earth hardened around him. A slow death by suffocation in the very land we were meant to inherit. I was hundreds of miles away, still a pawn under the Sultan's watch, yet I felt every moment of his agony. I felt the sand in Mircea's throat. Grief sharpened into a cold, precise purpose. In Wallachia, loyalty did not exist as currency. I watched our own people sell themselves for a fragment of fleeting power. That day, the news of my father's death and the brutal murder of my brother Mircea hardened my soul. The lesson was mercilessly clear. In a world ruled by ambition and disloyalty, survival does not depend on honor or nobility, but on terror. The need to protect Wallachia and secure my throne became an obsession. That afternoon, I swore something simple. No boyar, no Hungarian, no Turk would ever betray me again without paying a price greater than death itself. That oath became my law, and my law would be written in blood. Released by the Ottomans, I was barely 17 years old. The Sultan saw me as a potential pawn, a way to destabilize the Hungarian-backed government in Wallachia. My chance came when János Hunyadi, the Hungarian regent and the architect of my family's ruin, marched south for yet another crusade against the Turks. He left the Wallachian throne vulnerable, held by his appointee, Vladislav II. In early October 1448, I marched into Wallachia with modest Ottoman support and a handful of loyalists. It was a calculated risk. I was using my primary enemy's resources to reclaim my birthright from my family's internal betrayers. I seized the capital Târgoviște quickly. I claimed the throne. The principality was mine for the first time, but it was a fleeting victory, built on shaky ground. Hunyadi's crusade was decisively crushed at the Second Battle of Kosovo. The defeat was a catastrophe for the Christian European forces. With his army decimated, my rival Vladislav II managed to return with the remnants of his loyalist boyars and forces still capable of overwhelming my meager, newly formed army. My first reign lasted only about 60 short days, just enough time to realize how fragile power truly was. I was quickly driven out, forced to flee for my life, seeking refuge initially in the Ottoman lands, then moving north into Moldavia, under the protection of my uncle, Bogdan II. That swift defeat taught me a vital, brutal lesson that would define my future. A lesson no one taught me in the Sultan's court or my father's castle. Power is not inherited, nor is it given by distant empires as a gift. It is not begged for. It is seized and imposed through overwhelming strength, ruthless calculation, and an iron will. I learned that relying on others, be they Turks, Hungarians, or even family, was a fool's game. To rule Wallachia, I had to become the undisputed master of my own destiny, and I would make certain that the next time I took the throne, it would be permanent and devastating. I spent 8 long years in exile, a desperate political refugee. After the catastrophic fall of Constantinople in 1453, the geopolitical landscape shifted violently. Europe needed a reliable buffer state, The Hungarians, under my nemesis János Hunyadi, finally saw my utility. I was hardened by suffering and willing to fight the Ottomans without mercy. I fit their grim criteria perfectly. By 1456, the stage was set. Hunyadi launched a campaign toward Belgrade. This was my moment. I secured crucial Hungarian backing and a small, disciplined mercenary force. My target was clear. My cousin, Vladislav II, the weak usurper who had stolen my throne. We met in battle near the capital, Târgoviște. This time, I didn't rely on Ottoman generosity or fickle boyar loyalty. This was my war. I defeated him, killing him in personal combat, a visceral and fitting end for a usurper, and a symbol of Wallachian weakness. The throne was mine through sheer force of arms. I reclaimed the throne of my fathers. I was Vlad III, voivode of Wallachia. But I didn't return as the naive boy who fled. I returned as a man consumed by vengeance and a new, brutal philosophy of governance. I was done asking for loyalty. I intended to command it through absolute dominion. My rule began not with a coronation, but with a purge. I reshaped the realm through absolute terror. The laws I imposed were simple, severe, and absolute. Punishment was public spectacle. Disobedience was fatal. I needed to systematically break the endemic cycle of internal betrayal that had killed my father and brother. My message was unmistakable. If you betray the voivode, your life ends not in a swift, honorable battle, but in agonizing public spectacle. I was establishing a new order where fear was the undisputed foundation of stability. Every theft, every lie, every hint of disloyalty would be met with the most extreme response imaginable. The world wanted a strong leader against the Turks. They got the son of the demon. The era of quiet politics and weak princes was over. The era of the Impaler had begun. Once I secured my throne, the real restructuring of Wallachia began. My objective was total stability, a realm where my word was instant law, and where the treacherous boyars who killed my family could no longer conspire. My legend was forged here. In 1457, I invited the remaining boyars and their families to an Easter feast, feigning reconciliation. Once seated in the Great Hall, my guards sealed the doors. I openly demanded of them how many princes they had served, betrayed, and sent to their deaths over the decades. Their arrogant, vague answers sealed their fate. The oldest and weakest were impaled immediately on the spot. The youngest and strongest I marched south to the mountains to build a fortress at Poinari, where they worked under the lash until they died. Hundreds of traitors were purged in a single decisive stroke. I introduced my signature method of justice, impalement, slow, visible, and unforgettable. The Turks had their version, but I perfected it. A stake driven upward through the body, positioned perfectly to avoid vital organs, ensuring days of agonizing public death. It was not gratuitous cruelty. It was control. It was the ultimate deterrent. A merchant knew that stealing a single coin meant an agonizing death lasting days, exposed on a tall stake for all to see. The boyars who dreamt of betraying me woke up soaked in sweat at the mere thought of this punishment. Thousands died this way, pierced upon sharpened stakes lining the roads into my capital. The message was clear. Vlad's law is absolute. Under my regime of terror, crime vanished almost completely. People could leave bags of gold in the market squares for days without anyone daring to touch them. Wallachia prospered, because the anarchy of the nobility was over. My kingdom was secure, yes, but the price was absolute, visceral fear of my person. I became the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The name Drăculea no longer just meant son of the dragon. Now it meant the Impaler, and that name commanded more terror than an entire army. Having stabilized Wallachia through fear, I turned my attention to the real, existential threat, the Ottoman Empire. By 1461, my rule was firm and unquestioned. That same year, Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, the man before whom kingdoms bowed, sent envoys demanding I resume the annual tribute of gold and, worse, deliver 500 boys for his Janissary corps. I refused, openly. The envoys then insulted my court, refusing to remove their turbans under the excuse of religious custom. I resolved the matter permanently. I ordered their turbans nailed to their heads. It was not cruelty, it was a declaration. I would no longer be a vassal to Turks or Hungarians. In 1462, Mehmed II responded with fury. He personally led a massive invasion force, estimated between 60,000 and 90,000 men, intended to erase me and absorb Wallachia into his empire. I was outnumbered at least 5 to 1. Meeting him in open battle would have been suicide. So I chose another path. I ordered scorched earth. Wells were poisoned, crops destroyed, villages emptied. My army launched constant night raids, striking camps, killing officers, vanishing before dawn. One attack nearly reached the Sultan himself inside his tent. We retreated into the Carpathian Mountains, turning terrain, hunger, and fear into weapons. His army bled without ever finding me. The final blow was psychological. When Mehmed marched toward my capital, Targoviste, he expected resistance or surrender. Instead, he found the forest of the Impaled. For miles, more than 20,000 Ottoman prisoners stood on towering stakes, their bodies rotting in ordered rows outside the city gates. I had prepared the battlefield without lifting a sword. Even Ottoman chroniclers recorded what happened next. The conqueror of Constantinople hesitated. His army froze. Morale collapsed. Fear spread faster than disease. For the first time, the Ottoman Empire felt terror. Mehmed turned back to Constantinople. Wallachia stood. I did not defend Europe with massive armies. I defended it with calculated fear. My victory over Mehmed II was a triumph of will. Terror had saved a kingdom. I had forced the conqueror of Constantinople himself to retreat, something no European ruler had achieved. Christendom should have hailed me as its shield, its final barrier against the Ottoman tide pressing west. Instead, betrayal returned. King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, son of my old enemy Janos Hunyadi, was meant to be my ally. The papacy had sent him vast sums of gold to fund a crusade and support my war. That money never reached Wallachia. When the Ottomans withdrew, Hungarian forces advanced, not to reinforce me, but to remove me. A Wallachia that had made the Sultan retreat was suddenly too strong, too independent, and a voivode who ruled through fear was impossible to control. In 1462, Matthias had me arrested on entirely fabricated charges of negotiating with the Ottomans. The irony was intentional. He needed a lie large enough to hide his own failure to act. I became the scapegoat, the monster blamed for political cowardice. Europe accepted the story because it was convenient. I spent 12 years in captivity, most of them in the dungeons of Buda and Visegrad. 12 years while Wallachia weakened under lesser rulers and foreign pressure. During my imprisonment, the Hungarian court and the growing German printing presses launched a calculated propaganda campaign. Gruesome woodcut pamphlets spread across Europe, transforming me from defender into demon. My punishments were exaggerated. New atrocities were invented. Fear was repackaged as madness. That was when the name took hold. Monster, vampire, the Impaler. Yet even behind stone walls, my legend served a purpose. Europe feared me, but it also understood what it would never admit aloud. Only a monster could hold the line against the Sultan. My captivity was political theater, a delay. I endured the darkness knowing one truth. When Wallachia faced annihilation again, they would call for their monster, and I would answer. 12 years of my life were stolen by the intrigues of Matthias Corvinus, but my will never broke. By 1475, the political balance of Europe shifted yet again. Hungary finally recognized its mistake. Without my rule of fear, Wallachia had collapsed into chaos, effectively an Ottoman province ruled by weak puppets who inspired no loyalty and no resistance. Europe had learned the lesson it refused to admit. Terror was stability. They needed me again. I was released not as a forgiven man, but as a weapon reclaimed. A ruler forged by captivity and legend. To secure my loyalty, I married a Catholic relative of Matthias Corvinus, binding myself formally to Hungary and the Vatican. It was a calculated alliance. I was no longer just the wild voivode of Wallachia. I now ruled with diplomatic legitimacy and foreign backing. In November 1476, with Hungarian forces and Moldavian troops sent by the future Stephen the Great, I marched into Wallachia for the third time. The Ottoman puppet prince fled without resistance. I reclaimed my throne. There were no celebrations. The land was exhausted. The people were weary of war, and every enemy, internal and external, waited for me to fall. My return was as brief as I feared. Winter approached. My allies withdrew most of their forces, leaving me with a small personal guard. Once again, Wallachia stood alone. The Ottomans moved swiftly. Their army returned, led by my rival Basarab III Laiota, the puppet prince who had fled weeks earlier and now returned with the Sultan's full backing. The odds were overwhelming. I did not flee. I did not negotiate. I understood this was the final act. I fought until the end, as a prince of the Order of the Dragon was sworn to do. My third reign lasted barely 2 months. I fell in battle, not in chains, not in a cell. I died as I lived, fighting for Wallachia. They could kill the man, but the terror I left behind could never be erased. I died in December of 1476 on the battlefield, fighting the Ottomans. Not in a bed, not in chains, not begging for mercy. I fell as I had lived, armed, surrounded by enemies, refusing surrender. The exact details of my final moments were deliberately blurred. Victors control stories, and my enemies needed confusion. Some said I was killed in combat. Others claimed I was mistaken for a Turk and struck down by my own men. The truth mattered less than the result. I was dead, and Wallachia was left exposed once more. The Ottomans ensured there would be no doubt. They severed my head and sent it to Constantinople, preserved in honey so it would not decay. It was displayed publicly, mounted on a stake near the gates of the city. A message to Europe, a warning to anyone who dared resist the Sultan. The Impaler is finished. That was their belief. But death did not erase me. It completed me. My enemies killed my body, but they immortalized my name. Pamphlets, chronicles, and whispered stories spread across Europe. The fear that once protected Wallachia now escaped its borders. They exaggerated my methods, distorted my face, transformed discipline into legend. Over time, history rotted into myth. They no longer spoke of Vlad III, voivode of Wallachia. They spoke of a monster, a demon, something that returned from death. They believed sending my head to Constantinople would end my defiance. Instead, it ensured my survival. Empires fell, sultans died, kingdoms vanished, but my name endured. Carried by terror, remembered by enemies, resurrected by storytellers. Understand this: I was never cursed by death. I became the curse. They tried to erase me. They failed. Because the world does not remember the merciful. It remembers those who made even death hesitate. And as long as fear has a name, that name is Vlad. If you enjoyed this video, support the channel by leaving a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see how small armies achieved victories that should have been impossible, watch Impossible Victories. Top 10 Small Armies That Crush Giants, now available on the channel.